Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is post. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this particular verb. The first way you might encounter post can mean to display information in a public place. This verb is commonly used with the noun notices, which you might think of information, so maybe posting information about a public meeting. That might be connected to city government or school governance as well. But it's just that idea that it's being displayed or shown in a public place. Related to this is a more recent definition. So you might hear post used in connection to social media. People use it when they talk about publishing or sharing an image, video, some writing, maybe a link to another website or piece of information that is online. So anytime we're doing that, it's pretty common to hear our verb post. A third way the verb post gets used can mean to announce or publish something. I think, and as I thought about that third definition, it was probably most likely that you hear it in connection to financial results. So as large publicly traded companies release kind of their financial performance, what were their earnings, different things of that nature, you might hear they posted gains, they posted revenue, posted earnings, right? So again, it's really about that process of announcing this information to investors, shareholders, and the like. A fourth way the verb post gets used can mean to achieve or record a particular score or result. This definition gets used a lot with athletes and various teams. You might hear someone posted this number of victories in a particular season or in a particular segment of a season. A fifth way to use the verb post can mean to place someone at some place or at a thing. So you might hear of a guard being posted. So they're being told, right, be in this area, watch this. A sixth way to use the verb post can mean to enter an item in a bookkeeping ledger. So you might hear bookkeepers or accountants talk about posting entries. Right? This can be their debits and their credits. Now, if you don't work in finance, that sixth definition might seem a little scary or intimidating, but don't worry about it. It is a little more specific to that line of work. But for now, you should know that post is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms posting. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Now our base verb, post, ends with a T sound. This means when I add the ed ending, I'm going to make an id sound, and I'm going to add an extra syllable to the word. So the past tense and the participle form of the verb should sound like this. Posted, posted. Okay. Now, I do have a few phrasal verbs for us to discuss. The first is to post on. Okay. This is going to go back to that second definition. So generally, sharing on social media. So anytime we're sharing information in some public place or a platform. An example of this, they posted wedding photos on Facebook, right? So Facebook, an example of social media, it means this information was shared with their friends and maybe even the general public, depending on their settings. A second way to use post on can mean to fasten a notice onto a particular structure or onto something. An example of this. Student groups post meeting notices on bathroom stall doors and resident hall entrances. Okay, so it means they're attaching it. So maybe they're using tape to stick these pieces of paper or these flyers to make people aware of meetings. Another phrasal verb you might encounter, but not so much in the United States, is to post to. This can mean to send something to someone using the postal system. This phrasal verb and even that meaning of posting something, meaning mailing, is really more common in England, in the UK. It's not so common here in the United States. Again, we tend to use the verb mail to mean we're sending a letter, a package, or something through the postal system. But an example of how you might hear it used outside of the United States: he posted a package to me weeks ago, but I still haven't received it. Would be like saying he mailed me a package weeks ago. One last phrasal verb for us to discuss, and it's very specific to the sport of basketball, and that is to post up. So in the sport of basketball, when an athlete, particularly an offensive player, is playing in a position very near the basket, that this phrasal verb describes that action. So an example of how you might hear it used: she posted up, spun inside, and then hit a layup. Okay, so here we're describing a sequence of actions a particular basketball player made during a game. Right? If you watch basketball, commentators, you might hear that used as well. Now, let's move on and practice using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today, I thought it would be good to review the imperative and the present progressive. Let's start with the imperative. You might know imperative as a command, and both words are great. In this form, we are using a verb to tell a person to do a particular action, or if it's negative, not do a particular action. The imperative is rather unique in English because it doesn't have a stated subject. In many of my videos, you might get tired of me starting with, you've got to start with a subject, I, you, we, they, right? No subject here. The subject is implied, which means it's understood, right? Because I'm telling someone to do an action, the subject is you singular, if I'm speaking to one person, or you plural, if I'm speaking to two or more people. So to make an affirmative sentence in the imperative, you can just start with the base verb, okay? No suffixes, no special endings. So an example of this might be, post on our discussion board at least 5 times before Friday's class. Okay, so I would, this is something I know I've heard as I've taken classes, but it's asking to sort of engage in discussion, right? They're asking us to share text, right? Maybe read something and then offer our thoughts on it, read what our classmates say, respond to what our classmates say, right? So it's, again, back to that idea of kind of sharing information, but here the focus is usually on a single platform. Okay? Now, you can make a negative imperative sentence, so we're telling someone not to do a particular action, by starting with do not and then the base verb. You can also use the contraction don't. So an example of this: don't post personal information online, right? So might be, I know some people are very scared to have birthdays, their address, even sometimes their place of work, right? They get worried about what someone might do with that information. Now let's move on and talk about the present progressive. This is also known as the present continuous. We use this verb tense to talk about actions that are happening right now, or actions that are in progress during a time period that hasn't been completed yet. I always like to point out, because I realize this can be confusing to some people, you might hear present continuous used in your class, or if you're using another type of software to study English, that's perfectly fine. The reason I use present progressive with my students, though, is I encourage them to remember 2 P's to the name of the verb tense. That means you're going to need 2 parts or 2 words to make your verb. So in the affirmative, we want to start with our subject And then what comes next is the present form of be, and then the ing ending of the verb. Now, be is a complex verb in English. We have 3 forms. So if my subject is I'm going to use am, A-M, and then that ing form. If my subject is you, we, or they, I'll use are, A-R-E, and then that ing form, the verb. Finally, if my subject is he, she, or it, I'm going to use is, and then that ing form, the verb. You can see that in my example. She is posting yesterday's sales to our books right now. Okay. The sentence would be tying back to the 6th definition of our verb. So someone's recording journal entries, okay, right now. Now let's talk about making negative sentences in the present progressive. We do this by still following that same pattern. We have our subject, we have the form of be that matches, then not, and then the ing form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example. They aren't posting meeting notices in the local paper any longer. This might go back to that first definition of publishing, sharing information. Okay. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the present progressive. To do this, I start with the form of be, whichever form matches my subject, that subject comes next, and then I use the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Are schools posting more police officers on their campuses? Okay. This goes back to one of those earlier definitions where we were kind of talking about placing someone at a particular location. Here, we're talking about the placement of police officers. And in the United States, you've heard me kind of probably complain about this before, that we're not doing enough to keep our children safe, but this is one idea some people have had. They think by stationing more officers or trained professionals that this can prevent school shootings. Okay. But now let's move on and talk about some words and phrases that are related to post. And the first word we're going to talk about is just the noun form of this word. One way the noun post gets used is to talk about some long and sturdy piece of either timber, which is wood, or metal that is sort of set upright on the ground and that's used to support something, or it could mark the place of something. An example of how you might hear this used. We're replacing the fence posts this week, right? So you can imagine fence, right? And kind of those tall or vertical pieces of wood or metal that support the fence, right? So we're talking about those longer or taller pieces. Another way to use the noun post is to refer to a piece of writing, could be a picture, a video, or some other content that is published or shared online. An example of this. The company makes daily posts on social media. Right? So that might mean they're sharing pictures, they're sharing video, or other things. Now, one thing I also always enjoy pointing out to my students are prefixes, right? You might notice POST at the beginning of many words in English, and generally, when you see that, you can know that it's going to mean after. Okay. So an example of how this gets used in my classes quite frequently, post tests will be given the week of June 17th. So I teach for a couple schools right now, and my schools require students who are learning English before they start a class. We make them take a reading test, right? And kind of see, like, where are your reading skills today, right? Then after they study with us, a minimum of 40 hours, right, we give the second test. So after studying, that's largely how we get that name, a post test, okay? Another related noun that I imagine many of you were expecting, the noun post office. So this is generally the public department, though in some countries I think it can be a private corporation that's responsible for mail services. An example of how you might hear this used in a sentence. He visits the post office weekly to ship packages. And then one last thing you might encounter, it's the phrase to keep someone posted. What this really means is somebody is, if they're using it in the imperative, right, where we're giving that command, we're asking them to keep us informed of the latest news or the latest developments related to a particular matter. An example of this: please keep us posted on how his recovery is going. I'm sorry, I have a typo there. So HIS, right before recovery, is what it should be, how his recovery is going. You might hear this after somebody has shared that this person was in the hospital, this person had surgery, right? You go, oh my goodness, I hope they're recovering. Keep me posted. Let me know in a few days. How is this person doing? How are they recovering? So anytime you want to stay informed, that is a great imperative to use. Please keep us posted. I know this gets used in my workplaces as well. If we have some type of issue and maybe it's not getting resolved very quickly, someone might ask, keep me informed, right? Maybe once we reach a conclusion of how to handle a particular issue. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.